Welcome everyone. We're excited to share some country wisdom with you.
King Solomon had a thing or two to say about the path to wisdom. In Proverbs 4, he wrote, "Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Keep straight the path of your feet, and all your ways will be sure."
Join us now for country wisdom. Did you realize there have always been people who keep the seventh-day Sabbath? Matter of fact, you recognize some of it. St. Patrick. If you say St. Patrick, yes, St. Patrick was a Sabbath keeper. A lot of documentation goes into that. Indeed, St. Patrick shared with all of his people in his churches about the seventh-day Sabbath. Are there others? Well, sure, there's the Waldensians in Italy. The Waldensians, while they were persecuted because they kept the seventh-day Sabbath, they huddled in the caves and stayed far, far away so that they could maintain their biblical faith. And what about the Ionians? The Ionians also kept the Sabbath. What about those in Africa? Ethiopia, Sabbath keepers in Ethiopia, and the list goes on and on and on. Matter of fact, you'll find that today there's about 400 groups that keep the seventh-day Sabbath. That amounts to tens of millions of people. Tens of millions of people keep the seventh-day Sabbath. So if you look in the very beginning, God created it and his people followed the seventh-day Sabbath. And then if you look at the time of Christ, Christ and all of his disciples kept the seventh-day Sabbath. And then if you go and look at the end of time, in Isaiah it says, from one new moon to another, from month to month, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me. From beginning to end, God's people keep the Sabbath. Somebody along the way was trying to say, no, we've changed it over here. We changed it because of the resurrection of Jesus. But Jesus never changed it. Jesus said, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. God said, I changed not. His Sabbath is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Why don't you join with God in the tens of millions of other people around planet Earth, by the way, including China, who keep the seventh-day Sabbath?
I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on.
That's Johnny Cash.
I was wondering what you were doing until I caught the Folsom Prison. Which, why are we here? I don't even like being here. I know that I'm glad I'm on this side of the gate, not there. But there's just something eerie about being even on the grounds where you know you're being watched. You might not be able to see all of the guards, but you know you're being observed. And there's this feeling of don't move, don't say the wrong thing, don't.
They're absolutely trapped. You're not going to get out of there.
I know, but I'm not even behind the gate. I'm out here, and yet I feel that closing wind.
Deal with that life? Come on.
Do I?
Probably not, but come on anyway.
You know, Jim, this is not good for someone with claustrophobia, but it made me think. I have days that feel just like I'm in a cage. I might as well be behind bars. There's like, my to-do list is already so big. I know I'm never going to get everything done. And you just feel like it's just going from one catastrophe to another, putting fires out everywhere you go, that you have no real control. It's like you were in prison.
But I've got good news for you, because Jesus has a way out. Follow me. Look at that.
Oh, come on, can't be that easy to break out of modern life.
It really is. It really is.
Break out of the prison of our existence.
Yeah.
Of the lives we've set up for ourselves, of what society, all the demands that are put on us, where you just feel like you never get a break, and you don't break out that fast. It can't be that easy.
Jesus said, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It's that simple. Come to Jesus, he'll give us the rest. I love this town. It's so incredible, just the architecture, the colors.
I know the old buildings is great. I am such a history nerd. Well, have we ever passed a museum? Any of the places that we've gone where I'm not wanting to go into the museum, and I'm the sort that takes forever in a museum.
Yeah, because I'm wanting to go.
I know, and it was closed.
Yeah.
I want to read every sign. I love knowing not only my own history, but other people's. And it is just so sad to a history nerd like me that so many people are almost completely ignorant. They have no interest in their history, but if you don't know where you've come from, you have no idea how you've gotten here. So how do you know where you're supposed to be going from here?
Yeah, you look at this town was built 1819. I mean, for us, it seemed like a long time ago.
Americans, that seems very old.
But there's something a lot older that we've totally forgot.
And maybe that's why God told us to remember.
True.
You know the impact of Christ's message. It heals, it transforms. Do you have the eye for a great post, the heart for a kind comment, the skill to build community?
Walking Donkey International is looking for passionate volunteers, from seasoned content creators to newcomers.
We are a Christian community dedicated to sharing Christ's love.
This is a real opportunity to turn your time into ministry. Scan the QR code
to make a lasting impact.
When we were there in the historic part of that wonderful town that we didn't have enough time in, and we were talking about the fact that people have forgotten history. I'm frequently lamenting about the fact that very few people share my love of history.
You are a history buff.
The extent.
Yeah.
And there is a particular, you had mentioned the word remember, because it's one thing that sets the Fourth Commandment apart from all the other 10.
Yeah.
It's as if God knew. Why should I be amazed that God
wait, yeah,
knew
you
things?
say as if. It wasn't as if
I
he
know,
did.
I know. That somehow that one would be easy to forget.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that people have forgotten is just how it came to be that the bulk of the Christian church no longer keeps the biblical seventh-day Sabbath. You know, you'd think that would be a biggie. It would be as if the entire church, or 90% of it, had decided over time that actually murder wasn't that bad.
Yeah. No.
That we could justify it in many ways.
The problem is there was a concerted effort to begin turning away from the Sabbath. Now all the disciples kept the Sabbath. Jesus kept the Sabbath. Matter of fact, Jesus told the disciples beforehand, he says, look, there's going to be some real problems. Down the road here, Rome's going to come in and wipe everything out. But when you see the Roman army circle, that's time for you to get out. Speaking to those who were believers.
So he knew that was going to be well beyond his death.
He knew, and it turned out, he says, now pray that your flight isn't on the Sabbath or in a winter day. When was it? It was 70 years in the future. Pray that your flight is not on the Sabbath. He expected them to be keeping the seventh-day Sabbath still.
Because if you ask the average Christian today, why do you not do the seventh-day Sabbath? They will say, well, it's because Christ rose on the first day. We're honoring that. And it's not even questioned. Okay, when Christ was giving the disciples that admonition, pray that it's not on Sabbath, what would you say to people who go, well, that's because he was talking to Jews? They would be concerned with not running away on the Sabbath.
Yeah. There wasn't anybody else. And he knew that, Paul and many others, the diaspora would call it, they'd be dispersed in all the world to share the gospel. They knew those people were going to be sharing the seventh-day Sabbath around the world. Matter of fact, I know probably a little ahead of where I was thinking maybe we'd go with this, but Thomas Thomas, one of Jesus's, let me thrust a finger in your
Right,
side.
doubting Thomas.
Yeah, I don't believe you necessarily. Well, Thomas finally got it together. Thomas went to India. And there's really good information that Thomas was a Sabbath keeper still, and he raised up Sabbath keepers in India many years later.
So you would think that if anybody knew that Jesus had said, okay, from now on, I want you to honor the day that I rose, it would be the disciples.
Absolutely.
They would have gotten the message.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, John the Apostle, John wrote chapters 13 to 17. He's the only one that included those because they all talk about this special relationship with Jesus. Special relationship. The one Jesus loved. Who was that? It was John. But John didn't even want to write that because Jesus loved him especially because it was a mutual love relationship. So he wrote all these things in there. None of the other disciples did. Why? Because they didn't have quite the same experience. But if anybody would have paid attention to what Jesus asked of them to do, John certainly would have had it in his gospel. And you can't find anything that Jesus says, honor my resurrection. It isn't there. You can study the Bible from beginning to end. You're not going to find it.
I think another evidence for what we're saying, there is evidence because it's in Scripture that they argued quite a bit over whether new believers, whether Gentile believers needed to be circumcised. Well, why would they argue about that but not argue over a change in the day that they'd been keeping, as long as they had any ancestors to remember?
Yeah.
The fact that it's just not there, you have to say, well, either they all just went, oh, okay, from now on we keep a different day and it was no big deal, or it wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. Now you find, there are people around 100 plus AD that begin, speaking of these things. Matter of fact, when Jesus said to Peter, Peter, you're the rock, upon this church I'll found, or upon this rock I'll found my church. That isn't what he was saying. He said to Peter, you're a rolling stone. The rock was Jesus Christ. Throughout Scripture, Jesus Christ is the rock of our salvation. He's the solid rock. It goes on and on. He's the cornerstone, every place. But all of a sudden, this idea came in of Peter being the rock, and they founded the church on Peter. And all of a sudden, that church became extremely strong and began moving all of history toward another day of worship, actually.
But it was a very gradual change, which is yet more clear evidence that there was never any revelation from God.
Yeah.
That here's what we do now.
Constantine was the big boy that really shifted it into high gear of switching days.
And that was 300 years later.
Yeah. But what did he do? He said, hey, it's time to Sunday, the venerable day of the sun. Yeah. Because they wanted to combine all this worship. You've got everybody worshiping God on the seventh day Sabbath, and we've got all the pagans worshiping their gods on the venerable day of the sun. So if we can get everybody together, what's that mean for me?
And sort of baptize it by saying, well, sun, it's the honoring the Son of God when it was really the sun.
Yeah. Well, what's it mean? It means more power. More power to those who have the control. And that's really throughout history, that's always what it's been about. It's about control.
If you are already thinking, I'm never going to remember all of this, we have a study guide that you're going to want to get. This is The Lost Day of History. This is study guide number 7. You can find it at talkingdonkeyinternational.org. Ask for study guide number 7.
No one could ever calculate the amount of sacrifice that went into the making of this great nation. The gains of so many because of the loss of the precious few. As a child in school, I sang America the Beautiful. God bless America. We started every day by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. But a lot has changed. Biblical predictions are taking shape at an amazing pace. If you're about my age, you know that this is not the country we all grew up in. It seems like this nation is rushing toward a cliff with no possibility of return. When I became a Christian, I began studying biblical prophecy, last day events. I found a book called The Great Controversy that was amazing in its clarity. If you'd like a copy, log on to our website.
To order your free copy of The Great Controversy, go to talkingdonkeyinternational.org. Click on the Store tab and order your copy today.
You know the impact of Christ's message. It heals, it transforms. Do you have the eye for a great post, the heart for a kind comment, the skill to build community?
Talking Donkey International is looking for passionate volunteers, from seasoned content creators to newcomers.
We are a Christian community dedicated to sharing Christ's love.
This is a real opportunity to turn your time into ministry. Scan the QR code.
To make a lasting impact.
Also wanting to not be associated with the Jews anymore.
Yeah.
A little bit. We're more Roman. You know, we're going with the Romans.
Yeah. Talk about the
Who were
Judaizers.
the ones in power. So, yes, we want to be more like them. We're on your side.
And of course, they didn't like the Jews, so the Jews were still persecuted. And if you're a Judaizer, you know, if you're following after the Jews and keep the seventh-day Sabbath, you're just lumped in that group. And
even though we've already established that the Sabbath was established long before the first Jew.
Oh, yeah. Back in the Garden of Eden, you know. There was only two people then, Adam and Eve.
Right.
You know, they kept the Sabbath and right on through. And it's so interesting. I know there's been preachers who have offered $1 million to anybody who can prove from Bible alone that Saturday was changed from Saturday to Sunday or Sabbath to Sunday.
Did he have $1 million?
He didn't need it.
He just figured it was a sure bet?
Sure bet, yeah. You know, they've still got those things posted and nobody's ever claimed it because you can't prove it. But the shift, as we talk about, 329 AD, I think Constantine came in with his thing and said, look, this is the way it is. Everybody now, you know, is sun worshipers. You need to work on Saturday and you do your thing and worship on Sunday. Well, that shift kind of continues on, and the persecution continued more and more.
For quite a while, there were groups of Christians who kept both days. They still kept a Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
And then Sunday was more like a festival feast day.
Which is kind of where a lot of time now you say, oh yeah, you know, you can keep any day. You know, it's kind of that same general idea. You can keep anything, you know. What's really interesting now is you've got people like St. Patrick. You know, you think of St. Patrick, when you say St. Patrick.
He's a Catholic saint, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a Catholic saint. And, you know, from Ireland. But did you realize that St. Patrick is the Sabbath keeper?
How do we...
There's a tremendous amount of information. Several people, Dr. Leslie Hart, and I wrote a couple down here. Radcliffe Barnett, William Cave, William Skeen, all these guys who really dealt into that area and to St. Patrick found a tremendous amount of evidence that he was a Sabbath keeper and he taught Sabbath keeping.
Because that would have been the Celtic branch of the church, of believers. All the way through history, it is fascinating that there have always been people who've kept the Sabbath. It's never been completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Just forgotten by the majority.
You know, the movement, though, is these things had to happen and begin after a while almost clandestine situations. The Waldensians, you know, Italy, they started hiding out in the caves because by their time it could be deadly for you and your family. And the question is, well, who are the ones who are going to kill you?
The established church.
Yeah, and who is the established church?
And even not all the Waldensians did. There was always, you had the smaller, the minority of the group that did, and others that went along.
Well, if you didn't go along, you gave your life, basically. So you and your family, so it was a choice.
A couple of years ago, had the best experience. Steve and I were in Italy on a Reformation tour, following in the steps of reformers, beginning with when Paul landed in Italy because he was going on trial in Rome. And we went through the Piedmont Valley in Italy, where the Waldensians were based. And our guide through that area was a pastor of a small Waldensian church that still kept Saturday Sabbath.
Wow.
And so they still exist.
I bet you were asking him questions like crazy.
Oh,
at some
yes, I was.
Yeah.
Learned so much from him. It was wonderful. So that's just one group, but there have always been groups. Now, people might be shocked about St. Patrick, but there have always, this thread that runs through is that there have always been faithful people who haven't lost sight of the Sabbath truth.
Yeah.
People who haven't forgotten the Fourth Commandment.
I understand today, you can do some research, but there's at least 400 different groups, faith groups around the world to keep the seventh-day Sabbath yet.
Wow, that's more even than I thought.
Yeah, it's in the tens and tens and tens of millions of people.
I know growing up, the small-ish town I grew up in, just 2 or 3 blocks from my house, and I'd go by very often because it was across the street from a city park. But there was a Seventh-day Church of God. And I know there are Seventh-day Baptists. No way could I list 400.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of interesting to know.
You know, you look at the scenario, and as you started out saying, you know, it was very slow.
The change.
The change was slow. Yeah, Jesus expected them 70 years later, but much more time went on. And, you know, we know that, you know, Thomas in India, he was I think, well, he was killed anyway. Don't know exactly how. It certainly was for his faith. We don't know.
John was the only one of the disciples that died a natural death.
Yeah, yeah. Now they found, and you're the one I think who's the, again, history expert here. Help me out.
I hope you're not quizzing me on exact dates
They
anymore.
found, no. They found a scroll or stone or something in China that laid out Thomas's Sabbath keeping. And the interesting thing is there's a large number of Sabbath keepers in China. You know, places you wouldn't even begin thinking of.
God has people everywhere. And God has people in churches that, you know, they've grown up. They've either never heard this or have not really studied it, haven't yet come to that truth. And it is wonderful that God deals with us where we are, you know, and then keeps nudging us to grow a little more.
Yeah. I keep thinking about this slow progression, though. Part of me doesn't even want to touch on it, but I think we need to, and that's who did all this changing and who did all this pushing. And you know, you get to the time of Martin Luther, and Martin Luther was a monk. You know, he was a very studied man. You know, he was a beer drinker and everything else, you know, but he was a studied man, and God used him. And when the Catholic Church selling indulgences, which is you can go ahead and sin and you know,
buy our way out of it.
Yeah, we can buy those things. Well, by that time they had really worked hard to get everybody as a Sunday keeper, and because that was their controlling mechanism. Now people say, "What do you mean their controlling mechanism?" But I've got AI on my phone. I kind of love to use AI and just ask AI a couple of things here.
I don't even know how to ask AI something.
Well, let me try it here. And this one's Grok actually, but tell me, in various ways, the Catholic Church changed the solemnity of Saturday to Sunday. They mention it in many of their documents. Can you recite those documents and where they're found and who said it?
Catholic writers flat out say the Church switched Saturday's Sabbath to Sunday by her divine power. No Bible verse required, just her authority. Here's a quick rundown from their own words in Peter German's Convert's Catechism, 1910 edition, page 50. He writes the church at the Council of Laodicea around 360 AD shifted the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. That's straight-up admission. The Catholic Mirror, 1893, had Cardinal Gibbons claiming the church did it by Christ's mission, calling Sunday her mark of authority over Scripture. Stephen Keenan's Doctrinal Catechism, 1857, says the church substituted Sunday for Saturday, with no scriptural backing, just her right to set holy days. Our Sunday Visitor, February 5th, 1950, quotes a priest saying, "Protestants keep Sunday because they follow the Pope's call, not the Bible." The Catholic Record, September 1893, brags its proof of her supremacy to change God's law. Even the Council of Laodicea's Canon 29 bans Judaism, resting Saturday and pushes Sunday worship. Wild how they own it.
Thank you. Think about this. There's just so much, They themselves say it's only by our power that we've done all this. You can't find anything in Scripture. They challenge everybody to try and find something in Scripture because you can't, and it proves that they're more powerful than God.
They may not even realize that that's what it comes down to, that there have been men in history who've put themselves above Scripture, above God. In essence, making yourself a little God.
Yeah. Now it's supposed to be Grok 4.0, but when you download it, it's actually 3.0. It's
You'd lost me at Grok.
It's pretty smart, and covers the world and everything. But Catholic writers flat out say the church switched Saturday's Sabbath to Sunday by her divine power. No Bible verse required. It's astounding to me that when I became a Christian and I began studying more, and after some time I started coming across this question, and I started looking at some of these things and, well, this is just outright blatant in your face, and kept studying it, kept looking it over, and I couldn't come to any other conclusion. But it's true. What the Catholic Church says about itself and what it did, it's true.
Jim, we've covered a big chunk of history in a very short amount of time here. We've thrown out a lot of names, some dates. If you are already thinking, I'm never going to remember all of this, we have a study guide that you're going to want to get. This is the Lost Day of History. This is study guide number 7. You can find it at talkingdonkeyinternational.org. Ask for study guide number 7.
Thank you for watching. Join us again for another exciting Country Wisdom.
See you next time.